Hi and welcome to School Shorts with me, Melissa Chan Green, journalist and mum of two with an interest in education. And if you're a parent listening to this, then you will know that every child learns differently. Today we are speaking with Guy Pascoe from Independent Schools New Zealand about why there has been a surge in demand for independent schools in some regions and this idea that every child learns differently. And so how do you find the school that best fits your student and your child? Guy Pascoe, thank you very much for being with us.
Great to be here, thanks.
When I was looking into schools for my child and I was looking at what kinds of schools they were and I saw these words like state integrated, independent, I, to be honest, didn't really and probably still don't really understand the difference between all of them. Are you able to give us a bit of a rundown of what those names mean?
Yeah, sure. Great question. So in New Zealand, there's 4 different types of school now. So there's state integrated, independent or private, and now charter schools as well. So state schools, the majority of schools are state schools, around about 85% of schools, and so they are essentially funded fully by the government, and they have to follow the the national curriculum and that kind of thing. State integrated schools are schools that used to be private schools, but have been integrated into the state system, and initially that was the Catholic schools in the 1970s, and then over the kind of following 30 years or so, a number of non-Catholic independent schools became state integrated, usually for financial reasons. And then independent schools or private schools are sit outside of the state system. They get a very, very small amount of funding from the government, but really they are free to innovate, to develop their own curriculum, to run their schools effectively as they please, provided they meet certain criteria. That's about 4%. And more recently now we have charter schools as well.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's a very recent addition here in New Zealand. I want to come back to that funding very shortly, but just to say that you are here obviously representing independent schools from New Zealand. How did you come to be part of this organisation?
Oh, that's a great question as well. It's a long and winding road, I guess, like for many people, but I started off as a teacher and I've taught in state and independent schools, both in New Zealand and outside of New Zealand. And then I moved away from that into international education for probably about 15 years, working with tertiary and schools. My most recent job in international education was at an independent school, and that's how I came to know about this organisation, and that's where I am now.
Okay, let's go back to funding.
Sure.
So independent schools are privately funded. Does that mean funded by the families of the children who go there?
Yeah, so certainly, yes, they're very dependent, most of them, on tuition fees from families. There is a very small amount of government funding that they get as well. Until very recently, that's been under a fixed appropriations of around about $40 million a year, which is then divided across the schools on a per student basis. Mm-hmm. In real terms, it's about, this year, it's about $900 a year for a primary school student and about $1,800 a year for a secondary school student.
Right. A lot of people will look at that and go, but there are some wealthy families funding those independent schools. How come they're getting some funding when state schools are in desperate need of assistance with more resource or other kind of funding needs as well?
Yeah. So unfortunately, there is a perception that, first of all, that independent schools are just for kind of wealthy, elite families, which is certainly not the case. And our parents who send their children to independent schools come from a wide variety of backgrounds, and many of them making huge financial sacrifices to do so. Just in terms of the funding as well, actually the government is a net fiscal beneficiary of the independent school sector. So by that I mean that the government receives more in GST on tuition fees than what it provides in funding to the sector. So the argument that independent schools are somehow taking money away from state schools is actually completely incorrect. And a healthy independent school sector actually frees up resources for the government to direct to those schools in the state system that are really in need.
So because it's paying GST, but also because they're, I guess, providing education for students who would otherwise be in the state school and need that funding.
Correct, for a fraction of the cost.
Right.
So, at the moment there's about 35,000 students in independent schools. If you were to put all of those into the state system now, it would cost the government, millions.
Right.
So actually we are saving the government money, the presence of our schools.
What about the idea that you said that there are families taking a big financial hit to send their students to these schools? Why are you hearing from those families that they're doing that?
Well, I guess, parents will choose to send their children to an independent school for a wide range of reasons. And so there's not one factor, but that might be because of smaller class sizes. It might feel that they're getting more support. It might be because of family connections. It might be for academic reasons. It might be for faith-based reasons. Maybe there's a particular philosophy or pedagogy in the school that really aligns with their values. So there's a huge range of reasons.
Do you think that there is any kind of trend in terms of the demand on independent schools at the moment?
Yes. So, independent school numbers hover around about 4% nationally and have done for a long time. That's not evenly spread across the country. So, for example, in the urban areas like Auckland, it's probably about 6%. Mm-hmm. But anecdotally, there is high demand for places in independent schools at the moment because, for whatever reasons, parents are feeling like independent schools are providing something that their child needs. Now, to be really clear as well, that we're not advocating for independent schools over state schools. We are simply saying that we want independent schools to be recognised as a critical part of the wider education sector. There are some state schools in New Zealand, many state schools, that offer amazing opportunities and do a fantastic job, as there are independent schools. But we're saying actually that choice and that independent schools provide is really important.
Shouldn't mainstream schooling provide a good learning environment for all learners? And shouldn't we be looking at making sure that that is a well-funded and well-resourced and well-supported system so that families don't need to pay for an education elsewhere?
Well, to be clear, we really deeply believe that every child in New Zealand, no matter what school they go to, should have a great education. But independent schools provide a difference that the state simply isn't able to provide. And so that, we think that, there needs to be room in the system for those schools. Often independent schools are, because they're not constrained by, government requirements or what's the kind of the flavour of the day. They're free to make their own choices. Often they are the ones who are innovating, that are taking the lead, and really actually provide a bit of a competitive stimulus for the state system as well to move forward.
What would you say to parents who are thinking about an independent school? What are some of the things that they need to be asking of the school or actually making sure it is the right school for their child?
Well, I would say that, as a parent myself, and many parents no doubt listening to this, every child is different, and as education is not a one-size one-fits-all value proposition or, model. So getting to know the school and what is the values of the school and do you think your child is going to fit there is really important. And regardless of what kind of school you're going to, I think, you need to go to the school and visit and meet with the principal and have a wander around the playground and have a look in the classrooms. And you kind of know when you walk into a school if it's going to be a good fit or not a good fit for your child.
Yeah, and as we said right at the beginning, every child does learn differently, and sometimes until they're at school, you don't know how your child is going to learn. So it's a tricky decision.
Absolutely. And that's one of the things about independent schools as well. There is this massive diversity of schools. So again, within the independent school sector, there's not one type of independent school. Our smallest school in our network is 15 students, which caters specifically for students with high learning needs. Our biggest school is 2,500, and there's really everything in between.
Well, that's interesting, especially you talk about that smaller school, because I think when I and a lot of people think about independent schools, you think about big private schools that are, I guess, the ones that are typically, thought of as the wealthy family kind of schools. Can you give us an example of, and I'm not asking you to name names, but maybe a family that you have heard of where they've made a decision to go to an independent school and why? Like something that would be kind of typical?
Yeah, sure. Okay, so, I was at one of our schools yesterday here in Auckland, and that school actually is not the smallest school of 15 students, but it is quite a small boutique school. And again, they really just cater for students with high anxiety, dyslexia, dyspraxia, dyscalculia. They run a fantastic program, but most of their students have come from situations where they're just not coping in the mainstream system through no fault of the mainstream system. They just don't have the resources or whatever to be able to support these students. So they come to this school, and it really is turning around lives for these students. When you look at our bigger schools as well, even those big schools, often they will be supporting students for coming there for, again, a wide range of reasons. And it might be because they're looking for a really strong academic pathway, or it might be at the other end of the bell curve where actually the student is really struggling and just needs that wraparound support that independent schools are in many cases able to provide.
It seems such a range that would it be beneficial for independent schools to be kind of broken up into kind of their specialisation and seen like that rather than all together? Because they seem to me like such different kinds of schools that are all put under the same umbrella.
Yeah, well, I guess the thing is that we're a really small sector anyway.
So the pools would be tiny. Yeah, you'd say, well, you're in this group of one.
Yes, that's exactly right.
Right.
And so, although the schools are really different, they are all united in the fact that, yes, they are independent, and they are trying to provide something unique and something special for for the communities that they serve.
So what is your message? What's your challenge to those who you would want to support the sector more?
Well, I guess, as I said before, we're just simply advocating for independent schools to be really well recognised as a critical part in the wider sector. It's not a zero-sum game. For an independent school to win, a state school doesn't need to lose. We really want to build up the entire education system in New Zealand, and we're a really important part of that. So trying to change that narrative and get people to understand that actually independent schools are not just sort of wealthy elite schools. They're a huge range of schools operating, making a real difference to student lives. You
are dealing a lot with schools like the one you described that that caters for those who might have different challenges when it comes to learning, or learn in a different way to perhaps what we're able to cater for. What do you think is the biggest challenge or the biggest thing that we could really do to help those students in particular in New Zealand?
Well, often it comes down to funding, doesn't it? And, wouldn't it be great if there were 20 of these schools around the country, but funding is a real issue. And, we would argue that by providing a little bit more funding for schools like, for schools in our network, that's going to relieve a significant financial pressure on the state. And, then that kind of opportunity exists, or maybe stronger connections as well between state and independent schools. This kind of, unfortunately, there can be a bit of a divisive narrative between state and independent. But we want to work strongly with our state school colleagues. So, this, like the school I was talking about yesterday, how could we support state schools to come and see what's happening in schools like that, and how can they take that back to their own schools? I
hate to keep coming back to money, because I know what you're saying is that don't see these schools as schools where only those who can afford it go to. But isn't it a problem where if we have schools that are catering particularly for those who have learning differences and needs, that we're saying in order to get the education you need, you have to pay for it? Isn't that sad?
Yeah, absolutely. Look, and that really is a political decision.
But a lot of people in the state sector and a lot of people in government would say, no, we are catering for those students as well.
Well, yes, but I guess the fact that there is still really high demand for schools like this means that there is still a need. And, schools like this can actually lead the way and show how it can be done, and how can we then distribute that knowledge across the state system as well. That would be a great win, wouldn't it?
When you talk about the financial sacrifice families are making, I think that's an important one to go back to as well, because just to show the importance that some families are placing on their children, what kinds of sacrifices do you hear that families are making?
Downsizing their house, making sacrifices around kind of discretionary spending that they might have, taking extra jobs. In some cases, it's not just the kind of direct family that might be paying the fees, it's multi-generational, so the grandparents are chipping in, or the aunts and the uncles and that kind of thing.
Yeah.
Yeah.
How many independent schools, I'm totally putting you on the spot here now, roughly, I'm not going to ask you to be specific, but how many would we have across New Zealand, and how often are they introduced into the system, or how often do they have to leave because they don't have enough funding?
Yeah, that's a great question. So there are about 80 independent schools in New Zealand.
Oh, there you go. Look, you knew the number.
Yeah. Now, some of those are very, very small schools, sort of 10 to 15 students or something like that. Some of them are like day schools, for example. So there's quite a variety in there. We, in our network, so not every single independent school is a part of Independent Schools of New Zealand, but we had 3 schools close in the last few years for financial difficulties. And they were all schools that were catering to students with high needs. And, for example, there was a school in Taupō that was for students who really had just not coped in the state system. They were absent students. They were maybe they'd been excluded from school. Really struggling autistic students at big range, and they kept their fees as low as possible, absolutely as low as possible, but they just couldn't make it work. That school then closed, and now all those school students they're either going back into the state system, putting huge pressure on those local schools, or maybe they're just not going to school.
Wow.
So, if we could provide a little bit more support for schools like that, then that would be great. But just to kind of talk about our bigger schools as well, our bigger schools are doing everything they can to try to be as accessible as possible for as many families as they can be. Roughly 1 in 10 students at our across our network are on some kind of financial scholarship, and about 60% of those are for financial hardship. We have some schools that don't pay any fees; they're fully scholarshiped all the way through.
We talked about there being difference in demand depending on the region. When we're talking about those bigger schools, I guess, our largest city is Auckland. What can you tell me about demand on roles for private schools in Auckland?
So I can't give you specific numbers just because I don't know. But certainly, anecdotally, there is high demand in Auckland, and many schools have big wait lists at the moment. So that I'm not going to say that that's all of them, but when you think of the big Auckland independent schools, demand is high at the moment.
More so than it has been previously.
My understanding is yes. Yeah.
Right. Yeah. Is there any other advice you would give to parents as your parting advice in this chat today?
No, I think, like I said before, like I keep saying, we're not advocating for one type of school over another. Every child is different, and you've got to know what your child is like, and what works for them and what doesn't work for them. But we just think that independent schools play a really important part in the wider landscape. Yeah.
Are there ways, if you're a family and you think there is a school that would suit my child, but we can't afford it, is it worth reaching out to the school and asking about how do you go about scholarships and how does that work?
Yeah, absolutely.
How do you get that information?
Because every school will be different, and so you need to talk. You need to talk to the school.
Right. Okay.
Yeah.
Guy Pascoe from Independent Schools New Zealand. Thank you so much for your time.
Thank you so much. Great to be here.
Thanks so much for tuning in today. If that topic was helpful for you and you'd like to hear more, please do like and subscribe. It sends me that feedback. School Shorts is all about supporting busy parents who want their children to thrive. Follow on social at School Shorts NZ for fun ideas, helpful resources, and exclusive giveaways.